Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Adnastana. Pleasure to be back with you here on Points of Light Radio. Spring, I think, is finally sprung where I'm sitting, so thank God. I'm over here in the park, just finished some dinner, some liver and onions at a restaurant, and decided to stop here at this park. As long as I stay away from these geese and watch where I'm stepping, I should be okay. But enough about me. My guest for this particular segment is Istivan Horvath. He's a Freemason and Masonic book author. He wrote a book called Weekly Masonic Dotes. And he's here to discuss that with us today. I also hope to discuss the online research lodge he belongs to. But I'm looking forward to this. I always look forward to interviewing authors as well as interviewing new guests here on Points of Light Radio. So let's move forward with that. Like I said, I'll finish up here and watch where I'm stepping. I'll enjoy this El Pulpo cigar. So let's move forward, brothers and sisters.
Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
Hey, how you doing tonight?
I am doing fine. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Now, I understand you are a Freemason and Masonic author. First of all, why don't you tell my listeners and viewers about yourself?
Oh, yeah. This is already being recorded?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was made Mason in Europe, in Budapest, Hungary, in 1994. Before that, it was before 89, before the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the communist bloc in Eastern Europe. Every Freemasonry was banned everywhere. So I joined quite late. I mean, I was over 40 when I joined it in Budapest. And I moved to Canada in 1997. I came to Canada already as a Master Mason. And then I affiliated with, that time it was called Electric Lodge in Hamilton. Now we amalgamated with another lodge, and this is now Electric Valley Lodge number 100. In the meantime, I also joined some other lodges here in the province and in other places. The second Observant Lodge in Ontario, then the Research Lodge of Ontario, then another Research Lodge in Kansas, the Virtual Internet Lodge in Manitoba, Castle Island Virtual Lodge in Manitoba, and different Masonic research bodies and societies. That would be the very brief version of it. I was the worshipful master of this my stepmother lodge in Hamilton from 2018 to 22 during the COVID years.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the introduction to your book, Weekly Masonic Dotes, you said that a Mason might need a clear Masonic guide to interpret the questions about the fundamentals of the modern craft. So, without revealing any secret work, what might these fundamentals be?
For me, Masonry is predominantly about learning. about knowledge, about acquiring understanding of our world and of ourselves. I am coming from a place where Freemasonry was always not a mass organization, but a relatively smaller elite group. And when I say elite, is not what North Americans usually mean by the 1% richest people, but the intellectual, spiritual elite of a nation. And to be honest, I joined Freemasonry because I saw that in our literary history and cultural history, very, very many outstanding, prominent personalities were members of this fraternity, and it was a great honor and also responsibility to step in their footsteps and follow them, and learning and knowing as much as possible, and not only about Freemasonry or the details of history and symbolism embedded in Freemasonry, but about the world at large, was part of being Mason and working as a Mason. So for me, that's the most important part. And to be honest, it was a big disappointment arriving on this continent when I discovered that exactly that part is lacking. Most of the time, we are just going through the motions, empty formalities without much content. But maybe that's how historical circumstances made Freemasonry here to develop. However, I wrote this book because I wanted to have, probably it's too much to say that I wanted to force, but I wanted to ask my brethren, my fellow Masons, to start maybe questioning all those things that are told us as incontestable truth, which most of the time they are not, and to start thinking, to start questioning, to start doubting, and start thinking, because that's the most important part in Freemasonry. And the fundamentals are exactly these things: learning, widening our horizons, deepening our understanding, not only of the craft of Masonry, but also of the world around us. Because if we don't do this, there is nothing like that, and there is no ritual which we understand and perform in a meaningful way, then we can just go to a bowling club and have a beer and discuss all kind of nonsense.
Is that what you define as methodic doubt?
Well, if you don't doubt, and I borrowed this idea from Descartes, the French philosopher, that dubito ergo sum, so that I doubt, ergo, therefore I exist. So I think that we have to have a healthy dose of doubt toward everything we are told in the lodge, we are taught by so-called wise old past masters who most of the time just repeat certain urban legends without any real knowledge. And doubting, questioning should be the basic attitude of any good Mason. I am not popular with this view of mine. I am aware of it. Yet, sometimes somebody has to say even certain unpleasant facts.
Now, some of the parts of your book that I've read here, I believe it was in chapter 1, it talks about morals and politics. You mentioned that there's a ban on political discussion within the walls of the lodge. Now, I've personally met Freemasons who back a particular member of parliament or member of the legislative assembly, or just a candidate, and they back this gentleman or this individual four square. But when I've dug deeper into their sentiments, I've discovered that this individual that they were throwing their support behind was a Freemason. I don't think that's a coincidence, do you?
Well, any Mason, as an individual person, can be involved in politics. I think it is even our civic duty, Masons and non-Masons, to participate in the politics of the place where we live. There is a ban in lodges, which also a misinterpretation what was in the very first constitution by Anderson in 1723, but because in that constitution was that after the lodge, when the brethren are still there and didn't go home, they shouldn't, and they have a drink and a convivial conversation and get together. At that time, he said that political debates and religious conflicts shouldn't be brought into that place. And we have to be aware about the circumstances when that was said. A few decades before, in England, people were killing each other, all Christians of different denominations, because they all thought that their interpretation of the scripture or their interpretation of that supreme being is the right one and everybody else is wrong, and whoever is wrong and doesn't agree with us has to be killed. So in that peculiar moment in history, this ban and this provision to try to eliminate political and religious fights in the lodge among Masons was a very, very good idea. That's why the lodges at that time were the only place where people from different denominations, people from different political parties, so to speak, people with different political convictions or people with differing Christian denominations could sit together as brothers and share a common experience. Probably knowing the political atmosphere worldwide at this moment, probably this ban is still beneficial. I think it's good that we leave out the everyday mundane things when we go into the lodge. But in that particular piece of the book, I was discussing another interesting thing, which is sometimes every citizen of the country, or even being a subject of a monarchy, sometimes we realize that our own moral convictions and what we think about what is an ethical thing is different what is happening around us. So now, do we have an obligation to keep silent and not to address those issues? Or as citizens, we should we should voice those issues and address them, or eventually even act upon them. And it seems that I made an ironic remark at the end that it seems that we live in a perfect world, because that kind of issue, the contradiction between our high moral standards that we allegedly claim and our civic duties to act upon against unethical events and attitudes in the society, but we kind of don't act. So it means that we live in a perfect world because we never have to raise, so nothing is in contrast or contradicting our own very noble moral teachings. But I don't think that's the case. I think it's more like a cowardice that they don't want to we don't like conflict. No. We try to avoid any kind of conflict. And that's why we always seem to be very peaceful.
Now, let's talk about the Manitoba Virtual Lodge. I've been wanting to speak to someone from that lodge for some months now. Like, what is the purpose of the Manitoba Virtual Lodge, and how exactly does it operate?
Yeah, I am not a founding member of it. I joined only a few years ago. What I know that they don't have physical meetings. The membership is not only from Manitoba, but as I am here in Ontario, and others are in Mexico or in Australia or in the United States. Wow. Or other jurisdictions here in Canada and even in Europe. So it's a very international membership. We meet only online. There are certain rules I always have to sit in this office of mine. Now the door is open, although nobody else in the house at this moment. But when we have a meeting with that Castle Island Virtual Lodge, I always close the door. I dress up. I have a white shirt and tie and jacket. Everybody else has the same, so we have certain rules. We have we open and close the lodge, although the ritual is a little bit modified from what we would do in a physical lodge. With the approval of the Grand Lodge of Manitoba, the ritual is slightly modified to be adapted to this peculiar situation that we are all behind the screens and not in the lodge. Obviously, we don't do degree work, so we don't initiate or we don't pass to further degrees anybody. But for me at least, a very interesting and welcome aspect is that we focus a lot on education. which means at every meeting we have a paper presented, and after that a lively discussion and questions, and that makes a very good Masonic evening, because again, what I said earlier about Masonry, learning, and it can be, you see, I have to go back a little bit to my mother lodge back in Europe. The lectures, as they called it over, and in many parts, even in Latin America, they call it a piece of architecture. These lectures or presentations have this code name, so to speak, borrowed from the operative Masons. And it wasn't only about Masonic symbolism or anything related to Freemasonry. It could be, and it was at many times about totally different things like music or pharmaceutical research or history of certain institution in the town, and many other very different things, because it wasn't only that, oh, you have to talk only about Masonry and only about that. No, it was about widening your horizon, widening your understanding of the world. So similarly, in our virtual lodge in Manitoba, we always have a very good lecture. The leadership of the lodge always takes care to invite interesting speakers. Actually, that's how I met this lodge. One member heard me presenting one of my papers in another place, and they invited me to present something in their lodge, and I liked very much the atmosphere, the intellectual contribution and the interest of the members, and I visited several times, virtually, of course. I logged in, and it was a good, continuing good experience, and so soon I asked an affiliation paper to join them. And I never regretted, because it's still a good lodge. I know that some of them, when there was a Grand Lodge annual convocation, some of the members went to Winnipeg, and they had their first physical meeting. As far as I know, there is another similar lodge in Australia, I think in Victoria State, Endeavour Lodge. They work in the similar way through internet. I was honored to be invited also in that lodge to give a presentation. It works very similarly, a little bit modified ritual for opening and closing the lodge, but other than that, it's a real lodge. It's just adapted to this very contemporary technical devices what we all have.
Very true, very true. Are there any plans to write another book?
Yes. Well, after this book was published, I had another book in Hungarian, which was a non-Masonic book, and also some of people from my mother jurisdiction are asking or advising me to write a book also in Hungarian, Masonic book in Hungarian. But on the other hand, I also have a few longer studies, longer essays that I could put together in a next volume of my Masonic writings. Everything is at this moment is nothing final, but plans, yes, there are, and hopefully, at my age also, you have to think about that. Okay, hopefully I will have time to finish this project and the other project and that project. So, yes, I would like to do more writing, and also I like to go to different places and present some of my researches, or sometimes that I something I wrote. But the most it's exciting, sitting here exactly in this room where I am now, and doing research, finding different historical. I like history. I am a history buff. So also in Freemasonry, I do some historical researches, and I like to look into old documents and trying to figure out what was behind all that text that happened there. Yeah, it's I guess as the psychiatrist in the house, my wife is saying it's good that you are doing that because it keeps your brain running. So
Well, we look forward to more of your writings, and we look forward to seeing you back here sometime on Points of Light Radio, Mr. Horvath. So, all the best to you, and all the best to your lodge, and look forward to hearing from you again.
okay, thank you for inviting me.
Istivan Horvath, brothers and sisters. That was great having him here, wasn't it? Some things I gathered from the conversation. First of all, from a historical perspective, times change, organizations evolve. Lodges of today are much different than they were hundreds of years ago, and in some cases, even a quarter century ago. However, the need to maintain the rituals and sanctity of our lodges and the degree work that we do remains the same. Right? Now here's a gentleman that's very old school, but much like myself, he still embraces new technology. It definitely does have a place in the lodges that we have today. We can't ignore it, right? It does so many good things. It brings brothers from around the world together, and I do know this as well, that a virtual lodge such as that Manitoba Virtual Lodge that we spoke about does bring, for instance, brothers who are now shut-ins. It gives them the opportunity to at least meet with fellow Masons online, maybe attend a meeting, even if it's just virtual. They can still attend and be part of it, right? Right? And the Manitoba Virtual Lodge, I've been wanting to feature them for months now, and we've done it. I think that's wonderful, right? And isn't it interesting how you talked about what Freemasonry was like in Europe and other parts of the world versus the way it is in Canada, right? And it does vary region to region, even lodge to lodge, right? But there again, the sanctity of the secret work that we do still remains the same, right? We have to respect that, right? Right? And there again, where have you heard all this before, right? This idea of the changing in lodges and technology and so on, right? And we'll definitely have to have Mr. Horvath back here on Points of Light Radio, but I'll have to leave it there for now, brothers and sisters. Before I go, I want to remind you that this podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. I also welcome your comments and input. You can see the link to my PayPal account where you can make a voluntary donation to Points of Light Radio. We will use that to move this podcast forward. You can follow Points of Light Radio on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. My Twitter handle is at PO Light Radio. My Bluesky handle is at polightradio.bsky.social. You can see the link to my Spotify channel, as well as my Points of Light Radio store. Brothers and sisters, until we meet again, just step into the light.